Okay, so you're thinking about picking up Wings of Starlight, the new prequel to the Disney Fairies movies,
Mm-hmm.
and you want to know if it's actually worth your time.
Right.
Well, that's what we're here for. We've been reading reviews from Goodreads and Storygraph,
Oh, nice.
and we even found this really interesting blog post that analyzes the book in detail.
Yeah.
We're going to give you all the info you need so you can decide if it's the whimsical, nostalgic read you're looking for.
Perfect.
So what's the overall verdict?
Well, it's looking pretty good. It's got an average rating of 4.35 stars on Goodreads.
Okay, not bad.
So yeah, it's resonating with a lot of readers.
4.35 stars doesn't really tell us much by itself.
True.
What kind of reader really seems to be loving this book?
This one seems like it's made for people who really love YA fantasy romance,
Okay,
especially if you're already a fan of the Disney Fairies world.
I see.
It really leans into nostalgia and explores the backstory of Queen Clarion and Lord Malori,
Oh, wow.
those iconic characters from Secret of the Wings.
So it's playing on those warm, fuzzy feelings from childhood.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's smart.
Yeah.
But does it just rehash the movies?
No, it's definitely more than just a retelling.
Okay.
While it does have some familiar elements, it also has new characters and explores their relationships with like a depth you don't always see in prequels.
I see.
Like, for example, the relationship between Petra and Artemis is getting a lot of attention.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I'm always happy to see more LGBTQ plus representation in fantasy.
Exactly.
Tell me a little more about them. What's their relationship like?
They're portrayed as a lesbian couple.
Oh, cool.
And the author really handles their relationship carefully.
Okay.
It's not just like a token representation or anything.
I see.
It's woven into the story
Okay.
and explores themes of acceptance and finding your place
Interesting.
within a community.
So it sounds like the author is adding some new layers to the Pixie Hollow world.
Yeah, definitely.
But you mentioned depth earlier. Some people might hear YA romance and think light and fluffy.
Yeah,
Is Wings of Starlight more complex than that?
you're exactly right. This one goes deeper. It
Yeah.
looks at things like loneliness, resilience, and finding strength,
Okay.
like in unexpected places.
I see.
One reviewer even called it ruinous and heartbreaking.
Oh, ruinous.
Yeah.
That's not exactly the happy fairy tale I was imagining.
Well,
Is it super angsty and dramatic, or is there still that sense of wonder and magic?
it kind of strikes a balance, actually.
Okay.
There's definitely a bittersweet feel to the story,
Yeah.
especially because it deals with a forbidden romance.
Right.
But it also celebrates like the beauty of friendship, the power of nature, and the strength of love.
So it's a bit more mature than your average fairy tale.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Would you compare it to any other books in the genre?
Sure.
I'm thinking of stuff like Court of Thorns and Roses or The Cruel Prince.
Yeah.
You know, books that mix fantasy and romance with those darker themes.
That's a good comparison.
Yeah.
Wings of Starlight definitely has a similar vibe
Okay.
in how it explores those feelings of yearning and how deep the emotions are.
I see.
But in terms of pacing and tone,
Hmm.
it's probably closer to Serpent and Dove.
Okay.
It's a slow burn.
Hmm.
It focuses on building the atmosphere and developing those relationships
Right.
rather than like constant action and drama.
So it's not a heart-pounding page-turner,
Right.
but it draws you in with that immersive world and the characters' relationship.
Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah.
We've got a good idea of the target audience and the overall vibe now,
Mm,
but I'm interested to hear more about the actual writing.
sure.
What stood out to you from the reviews?
The writing is definitely a strong point.
Oh.
Reviewers consistently mention its lyrical prose and the vivid imagery. It feels very immersive.
Okay.
Like it pulls you into the world of Pixie Hollow,
oh, cool.
and you feel like you're right there with the character.
Immersive is good. I love when authors can really transport you to another world.
Me too.
Can you get us a specific example of the writing that really stood out?
Absolutely. One thing that people are talking about a lot is how the author portrays the pixie dust tree.
Oh.
It's not just a source of magic, it's like a living being
Wow.
that communicates through blooming flowers.
Mm,
And the flowers have symbolic meanings.
that's cool.
Like what? For instance, Lady's Mantle and Frisia together mean, I am here for you.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Right.
It adds another layer of depth and meaning.
Yeah.
And I can see how that ties into the themes of finding strength in unexpected places.
Exactly. And it's not just the pixie dust tree. The whole world is described so vividly.
Okay.
You can practically smell the flowers and hear the leaves rustling.
That's awesome.
It's the kind of book that makes you want to get comfy and just lose yourself in the story.
Okay, so far so good.
Right.
But before we get carried away with the pretty words and magical trees, let's address the elephant in the room.
Okay.
The prequel thing.
Right.
Some reviewers mentioned inconsistencies with the movies.
Yeah.
How big of a deal is that?
That's a valid concern.
Okay,
It really depends on how much you care about sticking to the original canon.
I see.
Some reviewers mention differences in Clarion's personality and question things like the origin of Pixie Hollow royalty.
Okay, so there are some differences.
Yeah.
Is it enough to ruin it for diehard fans, or are they minor changes? And do they make sense within the story?
That's where things get interesting, and it's something we'll talk about more in the next section.
Okay, so we've talked about the immersive writing and the characters and how deep the story is and those possible issues with the movies. Do they add something to the story, or are they just distracting?
You know, it's kind of a mixed bag.
Okay.
Some of the changes feel really natural and add to the depth, like showing Clarion being vulnerable and having self-doubt before she becomes the confident queen we know.
Yeah.
That adds complexity to her character.
It's always interesting to see the before picture,
Definitely.
especially when it shows their struggles and how they overcame them.
Exactly.
It makes their rise to power even more meaningful.
Yeah, but then there are other changes, like the whole origin of Pixie Hollow royalty
Right.
that feel a little forced,
I see.
and they don't really add to the story.
So it's like some creative liberties work better than others.
Yeah.
I guess that's always a risk with prequels.
Right.
You want to be true to the original, but also tell a new story.
Exactly. And some readers won't like those inconsistencies,
Yeah, I get that.
but for others, the story's emotions and the writing might be more important.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It sounds like Wings of Starlight asks readers to be open-minded about prequels.
Right.
It's not just filling in the blanks. It's reinterpreting the story for character development and themes.
Precisely. And that leads us to something else that reviewers talked about, the pacing.
Okay.
This is not a fast-paced action story. It's a slow burn that focuses on the atmosphere, introspection, and the characters' connections.
Okay, so this isn't a book you read in one sitting.
Right.
It's more about the journey
Yeah.
and letting the story unfold slowly. But what about people who like those exciting moments? Will they be bored?
It depends. If you want constant twists and turns and big battles, this might not be the book for you. But if you like stories that take time to build relationships and explore emotions and create that sense of wonder, you'll probably find Wings of Starlight really rewarding.
It's like the difference between a roller coaster and a scenic hike.
Exactly.
They're both enjoyable,
Yeah.
but offer very different experiences.
And Wings of Starlight is definitely more like that scenic hike.
I see.
It's about taking it all in, noticing the details, and letting those emotions stay with you after you're done reading.
That sounds nice.
It is.
But you said it was bittersweet.
Right.
And one reviewer even called it ruinous. Can you talk about that a little more? What makes it so emotional?
A big part of it is the main romance. It's like a classic forbidden love story, full of longing and heartbreak.
I see.
The author doesn't shy away from showing how complicated their relationship is.
Okay.
And the ending is.
Yeah. Well, let's just say it's not a happy ending.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So it's a tearjerker, but in a good way.
Exactly.
Like it makes you feel deeply even if it hurts.
Yes. It's the kind of story that stays with you.
Okay.
It makes you think about love and loss and the sacrifices we make.
I'm starting to understand how emotionally deep this book is.
Right.
It's more than just a fun fairy tale. It has some pretty heavy themes.
It does. And it handles them with a lot of grace.
Okay.
Which is why it's resonating with so many readers.
One thing that's been praised is how the author portrays Clarion's loneliness. Even though she's going to be queen, she still feels isolated and doubts herself.
That's something a lot of people can relate to. That feeling of not fitting in, even with people who care about you.
Right. And the book explores those feelings in a way that feels real.
I see.
And relatable.
It reminds us that even people who seem to have it all still struggle with those feelings.
Exactly. There's a great quote from Iris, another character in the book. She says, "When things seem impossibly dark, bulb flowers are sparks of hope. It takes time for things to bloom. You just have to be patient and nurturing. So be nice to yourself. You'll grow into it, I promise.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Right.
It reminds us that growth takes time and that we
Mm-hmm.
should be kind to ourselves.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a lot of wisdom in this story.
There is. That's one of the reasons why people love it.
Right.
It's not just an escape. It's about the human experience.
I see.
Love, loss, resilience,
Okay.
and finding your place in the world.
We've covered a lot.
Yeah, we have.
Immersive writing, complex characters, the emotional depth,
Yeah.
and those inconsistencies with the movies.
Right.
But the question is Wings of Starlight worth reading? So is Rings of Starlight worth reading? You've got me curious, but I'm still not sure. Will I feel satisfied, or am I going to want something light and fluffy afterwards?
That's a good question, and it really comes down to what you're looking for in a book. If you're wanting something purely lighthearted and fun, this might not be the one for you.
Yeah, that makes sense with everything we've talked about.
But if you want a story that's going to make you really feel something that'll stay with you, then Wings of Starlight is definitely worth reading. It's beautiful, emotional, and it offers a new perspective on the world we already know.
Okay, you've convinced me. But for our listeners who are still deciding, let's quickly recap who should read this and who should maybe skip it.
You should definitely read it if you love beautiful descriptions, magical places, and stories that make you feel things deeply. If you're into YA fantasy romance with a bit of darkness and yearning, you'll love this one. And obviously, if you have good memories of the Disney Fairies world and you're okay with a new take on the story, you'll find a lot to enjoy here.
So it's a yes for fans of immersive fantasy, complex characters, and stories that explore emotions. What about the skip it category?
You might want to skip this one if you prefer fast-paced plots with a lot of action. If you're really strict about the original story, some of the changes might bother you. And if you just want a light and happy read, the sad parts might be too much for you.
That's super helpful. It sounds like Wings of Starlight is a really unique reading experience, but it's not for everyone. Any last thoughts for our listeners?
I think the most important thing to remember is this. Wings of Starlight is a story about finding hope and being strong even when things are really tough. It reminds us that even in darkness, there's always beauty, and love can help us get through anything. So if you want a story that will stick with you, make you think, and maybe even inspire you to find your own hope, then give Wings of Starlight a try.
Well said. And with that, we'll let you think about it and decide if Wings of Starlight is the right journey for you. Happy reading.